Okay, so you have a question.
I do. I've heard you mention the fall of consciousness. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. This is an interesting concept for most people because it can't be grasped beyond a concept. But the fall of consciousness is an amazing story, but it's an experience. It's a very real experience. Now, one of the things that happens to us, we only have a very limited few moments in all that is of time in this body to perceive. So we perceive what we know, and we don't know what we don't know. And the fall of consciousness made that happen. And so before the fall of consciousness, everything was one. It was a unified field of consciousness. It operates very differently on some levels than how we walk around in our reality. In these higher dimensional aspects of consciousness, there is no fear, there is no anger, rage, resentment. Those are the result of the fall of consciousness. But in the higher dimensional space, fifth dimension and above, you basically have a thought, put your attention on something, and it's as if that attention point expands to provide you with what you ask for. It just happens. So if there was no doubts and no fears and no limitations, unlimited possibilities, in that space you are a spiritual being constantly growing and expanding. The purpose of creation is creation. The Creator is a creator. And so in this aspect of the fall of consciousness, there was an expansion, a creation that was going on. Now, in my conversation with Metatron one time, he said, physicalness, form, as you understand it, which is there has to be a geometry engaged to have physicalness. So there's density, there's form. But physicalness and form, as you know it, is like one grain of sand on the vast universe of sand. One drop of water in the vast oceans of all that is. Just one drop, physicalness. Yet to you and me, we only know what we know, and so this is all there is. And then we're in a very limited time frame. We're in a body that is designed to end in a short period of time. And there's a reason for that too. So this fall is a very interesting thing. And as it was explained to me early on, some time ago by Archangel Uriel, he said that the Creator created, and the Creator wanted to know itself in its fullness. And so one of the ways that it did that is it's like reached into itself and created the Creator gods, little g, the Creator beings, and created a gazillion of them and basically said, go create, and provided a blueprint in the first ray of creation, the will of the Creator. Said, here, go play. And in the simple terms, they went and played, and they created all kinds of really amazing things. And they followed the blueprint, and then Uriel said at one point, somewhere, somebody, instead of following the rules that said, put blocks 1, 2, 3, 4 together, and then you have this aspect of creation, somebody put the blocks together in 2, 4, 3, and 1. And nobody noticed, and it went on. And then it began to have awareness, and it began to show up in different parts of the blocks. It would be like playing Legos in some gigantic construction, and everything was red and green and blue, and all of a sudden there was one yellow one. And somebody started to notice the yellow one, said, that's cool, I want one of those too. And pretty soon there were 2 yellow ones, and then there were 1,000,000 yellow ones. And then it continued. And so something was new in the blueprint. And so the short version is, Uriel said, the creator gods went to the creator and said, we want more. So in this next round, the creator provided what we know as free will and expanded the blueprint dramatically. And so the creator gods created everything, and they also created new creator gods, because the creator gods had the capacity to create, to be creators. And this is where it started to get interesting. And they created creator gods, and then they created creator gods, and kind of how that all works. And somewhere, and there was no time in this experience, and somewhere along the line, I'm going to just call them for definition, some of the newer creator gods didn't know everything that the older ones knew. And in this blueprint, everything was created in the light of the creator, in the creator's light. And the creator gods had their capacity to individually create in the light of the creator. But they had their own light as creator gods, as you do, but you don't know this. And so that lineage went on, and some of those newer creator gods got very enamored with their creations. They loved this game. And they started creating from their light, their thought, their creation. And it was wonderful. And it's all still within the light of the creator, but they were creating from their own self-created light, without necessarily including components or tempering components in that process. And over time, some of those creations were mutations, distortions, wobbles, if you would. And they made their way into the construction. And it was like building a house on sand in a little bit of the way. You know, you start saying, oh, this will all be fine. And it is fine for 2 stories, but when you start adding 3 stories and 10 stories and 20 stories, all of a sudden your foundation goes a little wobbly. And so, but mutations, distortions, you know them as rage, anger, judgment, resentment. That's how they play out in your space. So the game went on for a long time. So now let me come at it a little differently. The purpose of the creation in form was to take consciousness and compress it. The word density applies to consciousness. Dimension is, let's call it a box. And in the box of this dimension, each dimension has its structures and its rules for simple purpose. Is that okay? But the purpose was to take all that was, all that is, and layers of consciousness and create something. Again, it's like you've got all your little building blocks and you say, let's play, let's do something new today, and form was what was new. And so they kept compressing the density to see what they could do. And so in that 12th dimension, there's density. There's much more than 12 dimensions. But in the 12th dimension, in form, there's density, but very airy, very light, nothing like density. In the 11th, the 10th, the 9th, all those dimensions did different things. They all weren't about, make a tree that you walk through into a tree you can't walk through. It wasn't like compressing the single thought down. It was creation. Much went on in all those dimensions. But as it got down to that compression at the 5th dimensional level, and they started into the 4th dimension, it was as if they had been tightening a spring and tightening the spring and tightening the spring, and the wobbles were built into the spring. And they got to one point and it snapped. And it snapped in a big way. And big way in this context meant that everything began to separate. See, that mental, emotional body that you have, it was never meant to be 2 bodies. It was meant to be one body. Think and then draw a feeling to it and then have an experience. Not be pushed by the external world, get angry, and then the anger just appears and you go off like the spring. So when it got down to that 5th dimensional level, and in my definition, spring broke, separation occurred. And so there's 2 parts of this. It was like, wow, that's interesting. We never did this before. Let's see how we can play this out. It wasn't a problem. It wasn't a ending. It was a creation that had a result. Just like, think about this. You make a cake and you go, or you make something and you put a lot of salt in it and then you taste it and you go, ooh, that one's not going to work. And what you do is you back away, you reconfigure it, you don't put as much salt in it, you taste it, you go, oh, that works better. Now I'll put it into the oven and bake my cake. So creation has no failure to it. Creation has choices and creations, and it's like, oops, and there's no failure to oops. So on one hand, we're in the oops, in the space of fourth dimension and third dimension, but the oops is taken on some variations that are not desirable. It's not a failure, it's like too much salt in the cake. And so the process unfolded and the density kept getting more dense. And so one of the things that occurred in dimensions and boxes is, in order to contain everything flying out when the spring broke, there was a very rigid construction that was created. It's referred to as Metatron's cube. Third dimension, very rigid, conditional, nothing unconditional in the third dimension. Remember I said a little earlier, you live in the fourth and the third and now the fifth. You live in all of those. But you don't know that because in this third dimensional box, very conditional, rigid, structured. In that particular time, so rigid when they built it, that there was no movement. Consciousness was basically no movement. And so there was a tremendous level where just nothing happened. In that process, they added a time configuration that we all call linear time, past, present, future, and then you die. Time is an application. It is not a fixed system. It's an application. And so in that application, you could do something and you could begin to see what would happen in a future point rather than a simultaneous or circular or present time, 3 different applications, where you do something and boom, it happens. This way, linear time, you had a little bit of room to begin to say, do I really want to do this? Is it working? Is kind of thing. So linear time became one of the configurations in the fall of consciousness. But your brain stopped functioning. They had to shut off the brain in relationship to the higher awarenesses. You lost your relationship to Creator. There's a spark in the heart. But other than that, you lost your relationship. More importantly, in a way, at this level, you lost your relationship to you. You lost you. And so the physical body, the mental body, the emotional body, 3 different bodies. The etheric body, which is the blueprint for the physical body, simply got separated out. You call it your astral body. You go home in it every night. It's the space where you space out and you think. It's all done in the etheric body. But the blueprint for the physical body started to have, it's kind of like 2 mirrors looking one another, and there's smudges beginning to be over here on this one, and a little mud on this one over here, and a little distraction on this one, and a little anger on this one, and a little resentment on this one, a little judgment on this one, a little hate on this one. And all of a sudden the physical body started having a lot of smudges. And the level of I don't trust began to fall into the process. And so when I don't trust you and you don't trust me, and then I start lying to you because, can you see how the unraveling of the game unfolded? But on one hand, it was all like, wow, let's see how far it can go. How many emotions and vibrations of thought and emotion can be put together and experienced, and what happens when you have those experiences? Am I making any sense? So here, let's see how you do rage and anger. Or let's see how you do rape and murder. Let's see how you do all those aspects of experience was built in. But the physical, the mental, the emotional, the etheric body was separated. The soul could not get into the body because the heart was too small. There's no fertile ground for well-being and beauty and graciousness and kindness and respect and dignity, integrity. All those words weren't there. They're there now. So that fall kept happening and happening. And one of the whole purposes, which is real interesting, this is actually new, is in talking to Metatron, he said the purpose, when we got to the 12th dimension, was to actually go to 24 dimensions. And we built it down and built it down, and we were building it to the point where the shift could be moved into opening up 24 dimensions. And he said, that's my words, the spring broke, everything went like this, and so we played in this space. And it's been a long time, 2 billion years of our time, long time. Each one of those densities that kept working through the process is when you talk about Lemuria's. Lemuria was very airy. It was very much a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th dimensional space. It wasn't separated. It began to have separation and problems in it, but very airy. That's the place where you'd talk about the fairies. That's the place where you walk through the walls. The density of consciousness was not compressed in a physical form so much that you didn't have this form. You had effectively a light body. When the density continued to compress and everything separated out, you lost the relationship to the light body. So what makes the fall of consciousness interesting at this point is we're on this part of the ascension now. The descension and the collapse, if you would, have already occurred. And the process of the ascension is very much in the making. And so what's happening right now, which is absolutely fascinating to me, there are those that are beginning to move into this 5th, 6th, 7th dimension consciously, various levels of consciousness. There are those that are beginning to put the blueprints in place for stepping into that living light body. But to get to that light body, you have to let go of, I'm not okay. You can't believe that you're not okay, because that's part of the separations and the limitations. And so, but see, I live in this 3rd dimension. I have real tangible evidence that they don't like me. And I screwed up. I did something, and I didn't really mean to take that computer home as to steal it. I really was just doing my work on it, but I got accused, I got fired, I got thrown in jail. I must have been a bad person. What's wrong with me? But in fact, you are experiencing yourself. And so where we hold ourselves hostage is in linear time. So one of the key pieces to getting out of this descension, where we're all sitting, is to understand how to get out of linear time. So what happens is, in real terms, I did something over here that I didn't like. My husband and wife died, and I'm really sad 20 years ago. I got embarrassed when I told a joke, and everybody laughed at me rather than laughing with me. I'm not a good person. But if you can shift this one concept, and you can get into present time, so you can only change something in present time. You can't change the past and the past to the future and the future. But in present time, you can rearrange your entire past, because I guarantee you it did not happen like you believe it happened. Every moment did not happen like you think it happened. It's not that you don't know what you're talking about, but you're not paying attention to all of the pieces of those embarrassments, of those mistakes. And you're projecting, I don't want that to happen, into my future. And so you're worried about this while you're embarrassed about that. And so it's very hard to live that here all the time. But if you can understand one thing, that your past is nothing more than history, information about how you did create at one moment. Information. And the other part of that to understand is you cannot have an emotion in the past. I say to you, how are you doing? You go, oh, I'm really fine. Oh, really? Well, what's going on? Oh, my husband and wife died 20 years ago and I'm really sad. Okay, I get that. But sad can only be experienced now. And so I say the next thing, I say, oh, yeah, I'm sorry about that. Oh, how was that dinner you went to last night? Oh, it was really good. I had a great time. It was really a lot of fun. What happened to sad? You have the capacity to change the emotion. And so as soon as you can decide, my husband and wife died 20 years ago, that was a sad moment because I really liked my husband and wife. And it's a piece of information. I can be very happy right now and tell you about my husband and wife dying 20 years ago. And in that context, I'll tell you how I enjoyed myself, and it was a wonderful time, and we did lots of really important things. But from this place, I can't remember those things because I'm sad. Does that make any sense? If you can recognize your past is nothing more than information to be chosen in the moment, and an emotion is there for you to have a thought and choose an emotion to combine to the thought. You're in present time. You will rearrange all of that. You will pull your attention out of the future in a massive way, and you can start to redefine yourself in a fourth and fifth dimensional space where I can be able to plan my future right now. I want to go to Hawaii. I want to swim with the dolphins. I want to have this nice experience. Buy my airplane ticket right now. Tomorrow, present time moment, make my hotel reservations. A month from now, get on the airplane, go swim with the dolphins. I'm not in the future. I'm in the future creation in the moment. Does that make any sense? So this fall of consciousness happened in a very wonderful way. It happened in a very painful way. But it's where you now are the ones that are able to change your thought and your emotion. Let go of your history, and you're going to find, living in that fifth dimensional light body, a place where you know all things at one time, no limitations. You create from where you want to create. That process of physical human being in a fifth dimensional light body happens minimally. But to be able to get the 12th dimensional atom cadmium body into a physicalness has never happened. And you're the ones that are being asked to do it for the first time. It's an interesting place where we experience ourselves. But you can't hold yourself hostage. You've got to learn to love yourself, like yourself. Just be pleased with myself a little bit. Works really fine.